who's the author of Black and Blue, Volume 2, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Thank you both for being with us, ladies. Laura, let's begin with you. When you see those images, when you see the images of what happened to George Floyd, what goes through your mind, and what do you think would go through your father's mind?
You know, we have to understand riots are simply a language of the unheard. As Martin Luther King said, and I understand that, because it's like if you're whispering something, if you're yelling something and it's not being heard, it's like you have tape over your mouth, so you're yelling but no one's hearing you. So at this point, it comes, you know, there comes anger, and with anger it comes, you know, lashing out. And I'm not agreeing with it, but I understand it, because it's frustrating. It's like, what do? You have all this built up emotion of not being heard. It's like there's nothing else to do, because, you know, you could yell and, you know, protest till you're blue in the face, and then it's like, what's next? You know what I mean? So it's sick. It's really sick to me that it's 2020 and we're still in this state of living. Like, this is ridiculous.
I agree, Laura, and it's you know, I have such affection for your dad. We had a really close relationship, and it's times like this I miss him more than ever. What would he say to us? What do you think?
You know, I do remember it was the year he passed was the same year Trayvon Martin was killed. And as he said then, it's nothing like crying for your last cry. And had my dad not been in the physical form that he was, he would have died that night. And a lot of people don't realize that. So when you're crying for help, you know, for your life, that's sick to me. That's sick. And my dad will feel the same way as he said about Trayvon Martin. And now with, you know, it's sick. Like, I can't even put into words. Like, no one should have to feel like that right before they die. Like, that, I can't comprehend that. I'm having a hard time comprehending that as a human being. Never mind that you're black, you're white, we shouldn't even be having this discussion today, right now, and we are in America. Like, it's unnecessary.
Cheryl, let's bring you into the conversation as well. You have an interesting perspective, your time on the force and also your time as a mother.
Absolutely. And so listen, you know, families have been asking for years for accountability. And unless and until we get that, you're going to have these kinds of protests. This is an officer who, in his 19-year career, has been involved in 17 uses of force, disciplinary complaints, and has never been disciplined. This department knows exactly who Derek Chauvin is. This department knows exactly who his partner, who stood sentry, Officer Chow, is, because he was responsible for breaking the teeth of a man and resulting in a $25,000 civil settlement. And so if you're unwilling to check a police officer, if you allow them to live to offend again, why wouldn't Officer Derek Chauvin think that he could sit on the neck of a man for 8 minutes and revel in the punishment that he inflicted? This was not about taking anyone into custody. It wasn't about gaining compliance. It wasn't about him being uncooperative. It was about punishing Mr. Floyd because he could, and he knew that he would have the support, he thought, of his department, Cheryl, as he has in the last 17 times.
Cheryl, when you and I have talked about how long we've been doing this, it's been too long that we've had to have these conversations, but you've schooled me that your focus, your blame, you often lay at the management level, the people that should have been supervising these guys. Do you feel that's so in this case too?
Absolutely. And moreover, the other 3 officers who stood by and acquiesced, who were co-conspirators in the murder of George Floyd, every one of those officers, regardless of their rank, and I do believe that they were probably a little intimidated by Chauvin because he probably has a reputation of being a Billy Badass. You know, he's the guy who kicks ass and takes names, and everybody knows it, so we're not going to step in and say anything. But one of those officers should have had the intestinal fortitude to say that's enough.
And Laura, I don't know if you know this or not, but your dad told me that the most upsetting thing for him about what happened to him was the officers who stood down. That was what bothered him more than anything.
Yeah. Yep. With their hands, you know, behind their back like it was just another day. Like, oh, all right, next. And obviously this is the norm for a lot of people, which is sick to me.
Laura,
it's crazy.
When we see these riots in the streets, I think a lot of people also will think of what your dad said, can't we all just get along? Do you think that at all? when you see some of this?
You know, I'm going to be completely 100% honest with you. I have mixed emotions at this moment. I personally couldn't watch the video because I can't stop shaking. I can't comprehend it. But I understand, like I stated earlier, I understand the frustration. I understand because it's hurting to your soul. And I was I'm not related to this guy, but I feel I don't even know how to explain it. If you're human, never mind that you're black, that has nothing to do with it. If you're human, you would understand exactly how I'm feeling because you're feeling the same way. So I can't put into words. I don't know what to do. And as she stated,
I think the word is, I think what most of us feel is disgust, right? We see that behavior and we get disgusted. And,
right.
and again, Cheryl, we also feel helpless. So what do we do?
You know, I say the same thing all the time. Every police chief serves at the pleasure of a mayor. They're elected officials and votes matter. Every district attorney, you know, this DA brought forth a third-degree murder. That's insulting, disrespectful, and unsatisfactory. There was intent, and I can prove intent. I can certainly argue it, and I'm not even an attorney. So to say that somehow they can't argue intent, he sat on that man's neck for 8 minutes, over 8 minutes, with his full body weight, as did his partners. And as an almost 20-year veteran officer who's been involved in 19 complaints, he absolutely knows how much pressure he was putting on that man's neck. He did it too easily. It just rolled off of his tongue, if you will, that use of force, because that's what he does. That's who he is.
All right. We're going to have to take a pause right here. Laura, thank you for joining us. And more tonight from Congresswoman Bass at 10:30 on The Issue Is. We welcome back Cheryl Dorsey, former LAPD sergeant. Also joining the conversation now is Dr. Sean McMillan, minister and host of Fox Soul's Book of Sean. Sean, let's begin with you. What do you make of what the Congresswoman just said? Is this enough, this arrest? Do you want to see more?
No, it's not enough. It's not enough because all of this, all that's going on in this country tonight was preventable. You can't look at what's going on this week in isolation. You have to go back to Trayvon Martin is murdered, and the man who murdered him doesn't get convicted. Eric Gardner is choked to death, and the police are never, it takes them 5 years to fire them, and then they're never brought up on charges. This pattern of people either not being arrested or not being convicted, it's not enough. Yes, he's arrested, that's good. But if you or I had done this act, being arrested would not be the culmination of the experience with law enforcement.
Cheryl, I wonder when you look at some of the images of some of the protests around the country, including the protests here in Southern California tonight, what sort of goes through your mind as somebody who was in LAPD? How should police be handling this, especially police organizations that had nothing to do with this original incident?
Well, while, you know, this didn't occur here in Los Angeles, people are fed up. And this didn't have anything to do with LAPD, but certainly LAPD doesn't have clean hands. They've got, explanations that should be had with regards to Ezell Ford here in Los Angeles, who was shot and killed by an LAPD officer, and many others. And so what I think about when I see this is, you know, what I feel in my own home. I'm a mother. I have 4 black sons, grown men, but 4 black sons. I'm seeing on social media, people just don't know what else to do. You look to the police to help you. You look to the police, well, ordinarily in normal times, to be the problem solver. But the police are the problem. And then it's exacerbated by a police chief who's disingenuous, by a district attorney who pretends like somehow they are doing something, really just placating us in the arrest of this guy because they can't do anything other than a third-degree murder. When we see the intent, we see him sit there for 8 minutes. That in and of itself is intent to kill this guy. He's already in handcuffs. Why are you sitting on his neck? Why are his co-conspirators not in custody? Arresting one is not sufficient. All 4 of them should be held, because if I had done something and involved 3 other people, I promise you, when they came to get me, they'd get them too. And it's not that difficult to figure out how to fix this.
Is there a problem with immunity with police officers, Cheryl, do you think?
In terms of being charged, I don't think that there's a problem with immunity. Being
used, a different yardstick being used to evaluate their behavior.
Well, listen, I believe, and I've said this to you before, that great deference is given to police officers typically in what they do and what they say. And we saw them try that. We saw them try to say something that would blow over, if you will. Well, he had a medical emergency. Ordinarily, folks might say, well, maybe he did have a medical emergency. Thank God there's video, because but for that, they would have transported his dead body. And listen, they knew he was dead when they transported him. And I understand why they did that as a supervisor. They certainly couldn't put a sheet over him in the streets, because none of those officers would have made it out of there probably alive if they had. And so everything that they've done and said since they took this man's life has been a means to mitigate and excuse and make and offer reasons that just don't sit well with us. We saw what we saw.
Yeah.
Never before have we seen someone take their last breath in a video recording like we did with Mr. Floyd.
Dr. Sean, how do we bring healing to the community?
What do we do?